Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about something that I really like. I love English history. I love ghosts. I love castles. And when you can tie them all together with the history and then the ghosts represent the history, wouldn't it be crazy if you could sit down and have an actual conversation with a ghost and ask them about all of these things that you know happened in that location and get, minute details? Kind of like if these walls could talk, right? So I love all of that put together. So I think we're going to stay in England for a little bit longer unless I fall across, some other areas that I can find a little bit more information on. England has, I think, some of the best historians and best easily accessible historical information. So it's a little bit easier to find out how it goes from A to Z with England. And I think in a past life I must have lived in England because I've always been really, really, really obsessed. So, and I've known things about England that even as a little kid I shouldn't have known. That there was no reason for me to know it as a Colorado girl, literally in the middle of the United States of America. Why would I know some of the things that I knew? So one of these days maybe I'll get around to going and have a past life regression session, and I'll record it and I'll post it here. Tell me if you think you'd think that's interesting or not, or if you think it's real. All right, so let's talk about Castle Rising. Now, Castle Rising is famous because that is where Isabella of France, also known as the She-Wolf of France, the queen, was held captive by her son Edward III after he got old enough to take power back. We'll get kind of into the history of that from the beginning. Okay, so we'll dive a little deeper in there. All right, so back in 1140, William d'Albini actually married the widow of Henry I, and her name was Adeliza of Louvain. Now, Henry I, if you don't know his backstory, he was the son of William the Conqueror, and he actually, it's rumored that he killed William Rufus, his brother, so he could become King of England. Now, William Rufus was allegedly gay, so it was like a big deal that he was in charge of the country and that William the Conqueror had left, control of the country to him. So it's rumored Henry I killed William Rufus. So now he's king. He is married to Matilda of Scotland. He has some kids. He has a boy and a girl. And so they're off. His sons and a bunch of noble, sons. I guess you can kind of say it's like the 19th century or 19-year-olds and kind of rowdy teenagers going off to fight in France. They win because they're battling Robert, the Duke of Normandy. And so they go to come back, and they're getting hammered. Ship's captains are getting hammered. And, one of the party, Stephen, remember that, gets a bellyache and says, guys, I don't want to get stuck on the water crossing this channel with these guts. I'm going to hang back and I'll catch a ship tomorrow. So everybody's like, yeah, whatever, went. Still drinking, hop on the boats. Henry I's boat leaves first, and, they're going out. Waves start picking up. Crew's still drinking. The prince and his friends, the noblemen, like the social elite of England is on this boat, getting drunk. Party ship, party barge at this time. So they start crossing the English Channel. It's dark now. Not a good idea because they don't have headlights on these boats, obviously. Ship crashes into a rock. Everybody goes over the side. Back in the day, for whatever reason, nobody can swim. Plus they're drunk. They all drown. Now they're screaming and hollering for help. And King Henry I's ship is just far enough away that they can hear the cries, but they can't get back to him in time. The next morning, um, all of their bodies are basically washed up on shore, so everybody's dead. Henry I now only has one child. Then we got Queen or Empress Matilda. All right, keep that in your brain. Anyway, so Matilda, Henry I's wife of Scotland, is too old to bear children. So he remarries Adeliza of Louvain. Now, rumor has it she's absolutely knockout gorgeous. Okay? Henry I dies. This dude, William the Albini, kind of a social climber, kind of greedy, marries her, and he decides to build Castle Rising. So, now Castle Rising is in a location where it's not known to be like in a hot spot for invasions or battles. So he built it up kind of just as a status symbol. You know, married the widow of the king. He's got this big castle. He's kind of a pompous ass. By all accounts, he's kind of an arrogant shit. Okay, builds it up, beautiful castle, and then moves on. So time passes, and I want to say a couple generations down, about 100 or so years later, the family that has the D'Albini family, or however you say it, kind of dies out. So it gets basically sold to the crown. So now it's in the possession of the crown. And at this point in time, we're talking Isabella, Queen of England, you know, of France. She is married to Edward II. Now, if you've ever seen Braveheart, you know the depiction there. You know, historically, it's completely inaccurate. However, he was, you know, said to be gay. And, which is not a problem, as long as he behaves himself in a kingly manner. You know, magnanimous, right? He doesn't. So, he goes through the string of, like, you got Piers Gaveston, who he ends up, you know, showering in gifts. He treats Piers more like the queen than he does the queen. And Isabella's from a very powerful family in France. Her brother is the king of France, okay? So that obviously does not sit well with her. So they all get together, chase Piers Gaveston off. He comes back like herpes. They kill him. Edward II's pissed. Finds a new favorite. Now we're talking about, what is his name? Hugh something or other. Anyway, so now Hugh is, what is Hugh? Despenser. Hugh Despenser. Okay, so Hugh Despenser is now Edward II's favorite. Okay, so once again, people are pissed. Edward's showering all these gifts on the Despensers. He's basically ignoring Isabella, kind of treating her like crap. Hugh Despenser is kind of jealous of the power that Isabella has, and doesn't like her, so he kind of whispers in the king's ears. He starts getting all of this property and belongings of Queen Isabella and starts collecting them. Not only is he stepping on her toes, he's also stepping on the toes of all these other noblemen in the country, because all they have to do is slightly piss off Edward II, and he'll take their properties away and give them to the Despensers. So obviously Edward is not a popular dude. So, Isabella, by this time, has kids. She's produced a male heir, so now we got the heir to the throne, who is Edward III. And it's time for the King of England to go pay homage to the King of France, because a lot of the territories held by the King of England are under French rule. So, it's basically like the Duchy of, or like the Duke of Normandy. Okay, so you got the dukedom, but it's still ruled over by the French king. So, to keep hold of those lands, once a year or every so often, the King of England would have to go over to France and pay homage for those lands, right? Now, Edward II is not the most responsible dude or king on the planet. So he doesn't want to go, so he kind of puts it off. Now, the King of France, once again, Isabella's brother, is getting kind of pissed, right? It's very disrespectful. So Isabella says, okay, you know what? I know you don't want to go. You want to hang out here with Hugh, do your thing. I'll go and I'll take our son. We'll head out, take little Eddie. We'll go pay homage for you because we know that you don't want to pay, homage to anybody. You're the king. You shouldn't have to, so we got it. So Isabella and Prince Eddie pop over to France and to her brother's court. Now, once they're there, she has no intentions of going back. She is pissed off at her husband. And she wants Hugh Despenser gone. She wants Edward to just straighten his shit up, get it together. So, as you can tell, that does not happen. So while she's over there in France, she meets Roger Mortimer. Now, Roger Mortimer also really hates the king, okay? His properties have been taken away from him and given to the Despensers. So, what do they say? An enemy of my enemy is my friend? Well, Isabella and Roger became more than friends. So, they hook up and they start plotting against the king, okay? So, now they need a force to go in to England and basically, usurp the king. So they need, manpower, they need ships, they need all the war materials that's going to be required to do this, okay? So what happens is Isabella and Roger Mortimer work out a deal with Philippa's dad. I don't even know what his title is, but the Philippa of, what is it? Philippa, why can't I think of it? In a moment, I'm going to Google it. Agenol, something, just Philippa of something, but I'm going to find out the correct one for it. How do you say that? Hinault? Okay, so she arranges a marriage between her son Eddie, soon to be Edward III, and Philippa of Hainault. Now the deal is they get married. She's going to become Queen of England. Her dad's going to give Isabella and Roger a bunch of ships and some soldiers to ship the other soldiers and the other nobles that are there in France back over to take, possession of the country. Okay, so that all happens. They go over, kick Eddie II's butt, walk him up in Berkeley Castle, allegedly, reportedly, rumor has it, stick a red hot poker up Eddie II's butt, kills him, and now Isabella and Roger are like the regents of England because Edward III at this point is not old enough to really take the reins, over and become the actual King of England. Now, in title, he is King of England, but he's not old enough to rule. So, Queen Isabella, She-Wolf of France, and Roger Mortimer are basically living it up. Okay, so now they have the entire country. They don't have to deal with Edward II. They got this kid over here who's king, but doesn't really have any power. So all that's happening. She's kind of getting on people's bad side because now she's getting a little power hungry. But really, you got to think about it. Was she really, or was it just a woman who took control and back in the day, it made everybody uncomfortable? Really kind of ask yourselves that. How bad was she? Right? So what happens is Edward III, who actually turns out to be a pretty fantastic king, he um, stages a coup. Okay, so they're at this castle, not Castle Rising, but a different castle. Set it up. Him and his homies go charging into Isabella and Roger's room. Okay, so they take them both prisoner. Isabella more so with velvet gloves, so very gently. Roger, not so much. He is charged in the death of Edward II. Edward III has to take control over the country, right? Because, they're becoming very unpopular. So he charges Roger Mortimer with treason. He's hung, drawn, and quartered, which is pretty jacked up. Okay. So basically what happens is you are hung up until you're almost dead. Once they think you're almost dead, they let you down so you can breathe again. They do that a couple times. Then they lay you down. They cut open your stomach, pull your intestines and innards out in front of you while you're still alive, because that doesn't kill you right away. You're still alive. And they're throwing it in the fire. I'm sure you saw it on Braveheart. So it's that thing, right? So they throw it in the fire. And finally, once they think you've suffered enough or you're going to die anyway, they cut your head off. And then from there, you're cut into 4 pieces, basically 5, I guess, because you got the head. Well, maybe 6. So you got the head, torso, arms, legs, and they're sent, all over the country to be displayed, to be like, hey, you screw up, this is what happens. Now, Isabella, she is punished, but not quite to that, ferocity. She is basically put on house arrest for a little bit in Castle Rising. Now, rumor has it she stayed there until she died and she went insane. That's not true. So, Isabella had multiple properties. Her son basically gave her a break. She has multiple properties. She started off with 3,000 marks or whatever per year to live off of. She had grooms. She had hunters. I mean, the whole kit and caboodles. She had a full staff. Started spending money like it was nothing. Then she goes to Eddie III and says, hey, I want more of an allowance. So then he bumps it up to 4,000 a year, which doesn't sound a lot now, but it was an astronomical sum to have, back then. So, she lives her best life, gets passed hands. So then after Isabella and them die, then it gets given to the Black Prince. I'm sure you've heard of the Black Prince. He is Edward III's son. He is married to the fair maid of Kent. And so that's pretty cool. And then it basically passes hand to hand as a very luxurious hunting lodge for quite some time. Mary Tudor stayed there. In 1544, it passed to Thomas Howard, who was the 3rd Duke of Norfolk. That may sound familiar because he was the uncle of both Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard. That didn't work out too well for either him or King Henry VIII. So now let's get into the reported hauntings. Now there is a lot of stuff out there that you can find. Now, the part that I'm interested in is trying to link up the reported hauntings to events that have occurred or may have occurred to kind of validate historical record and also have historical record validate the haunting. This is more effervescent, I guess. It's not as solid. So there are bangs, there's thumps, there's unexplained footsteps that can be heard. But mind you, this castle's been around since 1140. There has been some stuff that happened there, so I'm sure there's some energy in the walls. People have heard women's voices, they've heard tapping on the window, phantom smells. It's mostly tobacco, thank goodness, because let's face it, back then, nothing really smelled that great. Male voices, physical interaction, so having people getting touched, having their coats pulled on, their hair tugged. Now, like I said earlier, they said that she was insane when she died. She wasn't insane. She was a powerful woman who took control over her life. And that makes people very, very, very uncomfortable. Even today it does. So I say, you get it, girl. And I really like Isabella, the She-Wolf of France. She is the shit. Okay, so that's the story of Castle Rising. Now let's get into Burr Castle. Burr Castle is actually not what your standard castles are, okay? It was originally a Roman fort, which is freaking cool, right? That it still exists to this day. So it's from the late 3rd century. The Romans built something called Saxon shore forts, okay? Now they're all along the coast, and it was because the Saxon invasion, right? So the Saxons are trying to invade England and take over territory there, and the Romans have to try to keep them out. So keep in mind, when I say the 3rd century, we're really talking about the 200s AD. So it's a shit time long ago, okay? So they set them up along the shore so that way it would be like a wall of defense against the Saxons. And because the Saxons, like I said, are invading. So it was garrisoned by Roman cavalry. They're basically like the rapid response team that would go out and try to stop the invasion if they saw them coming up. And it happened quite a bit. Now, there's not actual like battles documented, but as you can imagine, it was an ongoing fight. It wasn't like full-on Towton or any of those big battles, but they skirmishes definitely trying to keep power out. All right. Now, in 367 AD, barbarians, I love that word, barbarians, from Scotland, Ireland, and Germany. Now, keep in mind, Saxons are typically from Germany. Coordinated attacks and raids in England itself, okay? And they started attacking shore forts, all right? So, one by one, they started falling into the hands of, the invaders. And it wasn't until 369 AD that a large force from Rome came back and reinforced, the troops that were there trying to hold off the invaders. So they did that for a while. But really, it was like sticking, like, you ever heard the Dutch boy with the finger in the hole in the dike? Basically what it was. Because by 400 AD, Romans started kind of winding down, sending troops there. They started pulling out forces to go deal with all of their other problems, through their massive empire. It was starting to kind of fall apart, and is England not really that big a deal? So it started dwindling down, and by 500 AD, the Roman presence, as far as soldiers, has basically completely left, Burr Castle and the Saxon shore forts. It wasn't really needed anymore. So the Saxons finally took over, and they were hanging out there and in control until the Normans invaded, which is William the Conqueror, William the Bastard, however you look at it. So, they fought each other. Normans win, spoiler alert. They're finding mass graves and mass burials around these shore forts full of Saxons. So there's quite a bit of dead bodies in these areas. Which really for England, if you think about it, it's not that uncommon because it's not a huge landmass. But a lot of people have died there. So got these mass graves. And then in the 12th century, a Motte and Bailey castle was built within the bounds, like in the corner of the fort. And it was really not a castle like you would think of. It was more of like a watchtower. And some people think it could also have been used as a lighthouse for, the shore there. Because it was built on an estuary that no longer actually exists in that part of England. So the coast is a little bit further back. And you got rivers and stuff there. It's really pretty, but not a huge waterway like it was. So today, the stories and the ghost stories that surround this amazing historic site are actually pretty cool. So there's reports of sounds of battles between Anglo-Saxon and Roman soldiers. They occur annually, supposedly on April 22nd. So if you're in that general area, April 22nd, head down, see if it's true. Let me know. Another ghost sighting is that of an unknown person being wrapped up in a white flag and thrown off the south wall. Now, keep in mind, the south wall doesn't exist anymore because there have, when they built the castle, they took a couple walls down. Also, stonework and stuff like that gets stolen over the years to be used in other buildings and other castles, other churches. So that wall's not even there anymore. But yet, people are still seeing this guy up on this wall getting chucked over. Now, I looked into that a little bit. It looks like that was a punishment for doing something, I guess, unethical or maybe not soldierly, something wrong. So that was considered a punishment. There is the ghost of Black Shuck, because you gotta have black shucks, right? So Black Shuck is a large black dog with red eyes, and the townsfolk say that that is the apparition of the devil. You have to have black dogs. You have to. Especially with red eyes haunting an area. Otherwise, it's not official. There's also the ghost of, let's see, Old Scarf. I like this one. Next time I get a black dog, I'm going to name him Old Scarf. Now, Old Scarf is thought to be the apparition of Baron Rudolf Scarf. He was a German mercenary that was excommunicated from Germany for unspecified, wicked, and depraved actions, which we gotta figure out what the hell those were, because we're talking about a 13th century German mercenary. They tore some stuff up, and it was perfectly okay. They would go into villages, burn the place down, rape the women, kill the children. So for your actions to be considered wicked and depraved, what the hell did you do, bro? What did you do? So he's another black dog. I don't know how you would tell the two apart, but you got two black dogs. There's also an apparition of a guy that was seen walking the dog. So there's a bunch of history there. So there's a bunch of sightings. Once again, if you're ever in that neck of woods, go check it out. I'm going to try to find as many cool pictures of these places as I can to show as we go, and hopefully you like it. I, like I said, am going to kind of stick to England unless I come up with a cool story. Like, I want to find out if where one of the Mad had been locked up. I think it was in a convent. I want to see if that's haunted because I think she's really interesting too. I'd like to learn as much about her as I can find. So maybe I'll do something from Spain. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit subscribe and like. Also, tell people about this so that way this video has more than like 7 views. That would